Hi everyone, in today's video we're going to be reviewing chapter 4, which was learning how to design studies, whether that's an observational study, a survey, a sample, or an experiment. And so, I'm sorry, my brain just realized there's not something included on here that I want to make sure I include at the end. This is really written out a lot. I'm going to try to just make some notes and not just read straight from the page. But what is an observational study? It's when you just collect information from groups by measuring a variable of interest, but you don't influence the response, right? So you're just, if you had 50 people and you wanted to know their heart rate after taking a medicine, but you don't assign who's going to take what medicine. You just record after time who had what heart rate. So there's no treatment, which is, I always go back to treatment. Are you assigning treatment? So how do you collect data? How do you sample? Is you can do a simple random sample where everything's just random, and we talked about in chapter 4, you might want to go back and look at your notes at how to do a random sample. If they described how, you would write out, remember there's out of a hat where you say you number everybody 1 through whatever, put all the numbers on identical slips of paper in a hat, and you draw the first 10 numbers, those people get this, the second, whatever your problem's talking about. Or you could use a random number table, which you might want to go back and review that, or you could use technology. Then you have a stratified random sample, which, remember, this one is sum from all. Which, to me, I also equivalate this with blocking, but blocking is an experiment and this is just sampling. So what you do is you just group them based on some characteristic, and then you're going to take some from each sample. That would be like blocking based on grade, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, and then taking 20 from each grade level. A cluster is the opposite. It's all from some. So if I grouped y'all again by class, freshmen, sophomore, junior, seniors, and then I only picked 2 classes, so I took just the freshmen and the juniors, but I took all of the freshmen and all of the juniors. That would be a cluster. Also, the reason you do some clusters a lot is based on location. Like if you did it by neighborhoods and you just picked one neighborhood so you don't have to go around everywhere. But now that could be kind of go into how you could sample badly. If it's convenient sample, that's going to probably cause some bias. Response bias is, if they're going to want to word a certain way, or if your question's worded a certain way to make them answer on one end of the spectrum, and then voluntary response bias if they can choose to respond or not, or if they volunteer. What can go wrong is if you have undercoverage or non-response, right? If people don't respond, or if some can't be chosen, like if you do it over the phone, people that don't have a phone, and that type of thing. So when you start to talk about bias, you need to identify the bias and say if it will overestimate or underestimate value. Right, so if you are doing, let's say, something on the computer, so you're leaving everyone out of the computer and you're asking, is internet important? Well, because you did under coverage and you left out everyone that doesn't have a computer, in this scenario that would overestimate the proportion of people that think internet is important, because if they don't have a computer, they probably don't think it's important. So you're not going to have as many people saying no as there might be. So you have to really think in context of your problem. Who are you leaving out, or how is the question worded to make people answer a certain way, and is that going to overestimate or underestimate whatever they're asking about? So that is sampling, and then we get into experiments. So how you design your experiment is important, and there's 4 key aspects which we'll talk about at the end. But an experiment is the only way to show cause and effect. So what is an experiment is you have random treatment. So I promise on these experiment questions, if you identify what your treatment is and write it down or something, it's going to help you not confuse later on treatment versus blocking. So identify your treatment and how many different treatments there are. Identify your experimental units, which is who or what's getting the experiment. And then how can you experiment well is you can do a completely randomized design, which means experimental units are all assigned the treatment completely by chance. So what would that look like is you have your sample, and then let's say you have 2 treatments you're trying to determine about a drug. So you have the drug you're trying to test, its effects on, and a placebo. And you have 50 people. Well, you just somehow randomly assign the 2 treatments 1 and treatments 2. And that process is random, whether you do out of a hat or technology. But 25 go here and 25 go here. And then you compare the results. Is there a difference? That's completely randomized design. So a block design would mean you group your experimental units by a certain characteristic. So it is not random. Blocking is not random. Just like stratified is not random, right? You don't just group them randomly, you group them based on a characteristic. Same thing here, it's just called blocking because it's an experiment now. And then you randomly assign treatment within each block. So if you have your group of 50, and then you think this drug is affected by gender, so you block group 1, group 2 is all your women. So I'm trying to stay generic, I'm just talking in a scenario. But that is not random. That's based on some characteristic, some confounding variable that you think might affect your data. And then within each group, you assign half treatment 1, half treatment 2, half treatment 1, half treatment 2. Now that process would be random. Who in 2 gets each treatment and who in 1 gets each treatment should be random. And then what you would do is you compare the results for group 1 and see is there a difference for women. Compare the results for group 2, see is there a difference in men. And then you could compare both those if you needed to. Okay, so then the other design is matched pairs, which is similar to blocking. It's blocks of 2 if you do the first way. Matching pairs by similarities would be blocks of 2. So you could do twins or spouses, or you could, I think we did an example in class where it was cholesterol level, you would paired by people closest in cholesterol level, and then within each pair, so you can only do this if you have 2 treatments. One person gets one treatment, one person gets the other treatment. If you have more than one treatment, you couldn't do pairs, you'd have to do blocks. So that is the first type. So instead of saying group, I'm going to call them twins since it's pairs. Doesn't necessarily literally have to be a twin, but so that was on purpose, right? That was based on some similarity. And then who gets what treatment? So twin 1 might get treatment. Oh, why am I doing that in red? That is random. Treatment 1 and twin 2 gets treatment 2, or it could be vice versa. But that process of who gets which one should be random. That is, and then you can compare. And you could do, you have multiple. So then you would come down here and you do another twin 1, another twin 2, randomize who gets which one, and compare. If I had more room, I would show that. Then we have another version of match pairs, is a person gets both treatments. And it's random on who gets which one first, right? So now it doesn't have to literally be pairs, but it's like you have your total sample, and each person is going to do every treatment, and now the order is going to vary. So I'm just going to say half the people is in group 1, half's in group 2, and these people are going to get treatment 1 and then treatment 2, but every person in group 1 is doing both of those, and then every person in group 2 does treatment 2 and then treatment 1, but it's random on the order. And now sometimes they ask, why does it need to be random on the order? Why can't everybody do treatment 1 and then treatment 2, or vice versa? And again, you just have to think really in context what confounding variable could come into play if everybody does the same treatment first and then the same treatment second. So I can't really give you a specific way, just think in context what confounding variable could mess up. So those are your 3 types: completely randomized, block, or matched pairs. We have 2 different types of matched pairs. Another thing they talk about with experiments is blind, single blind, or double blind. So it's, does the subject know what treatment? The subject does not know what treatment they receive is single blind. Now if the subject and experimenter do not know what treatment they receive is double blind. So subject and experimenter don't know, double blind. And that is possible if, like, example, if you have a placebo and a real pill and they look identical, and you have it written down, but the person actually administering the experiment does not know. And then the last big thing is confounding variables. So it's 2 variables that are associated in such a way that their effects on a response variable cannot be distinguished from one another. Right? So to help with confounding variables, that is why we block or do matched pairs. We block based on a confounding variable. So when in doubt, if you don't know if it's asking about experiment or why you do something, go back to reduce confounding variables. So what are the 4 components of an experiment? You need to have random assignment. So I'm going to write these down here. I don't know if I'll have room, but you need to have a control. So now control is kind of 2 different things. It could either be a placebo, like a control group with a placebo, or that could also be no treatment. But you would want to do a placebo before no treatment, so there's no placebo effect going on. But that also is keeping all other variables the same, right? That goes back to confounding variables. So what is control in an experiment? It's using a placebo or a no treatment group and keeping other variables the same. Right? If you're wondering if your depression drug works, but the one that get the drug also are in the sun more, and the ones that don't get the drug are inside more, maybe it was the sun, not your drug, so you want to try to keep everything else the same. The next component is replication. So what is replication? That more than one person gets each treatment, right? We don't only want one person doing treatment 1 and one person doing treatment 2, because what if, again, it goes back to confounding variables. What if there's something else causing a difference? So for replication, more than one get each treatment. More than one get each treatment. And the last component of a good experiment is control. And I already did control. Compare. Right at the end, you need to make some comparison. Was there a difference? Was there not a difference? All that. Okay. So that is chapter 4. I want to just reiterate. So if you want to imply that there was one thing caused something else, then you need it to be random. So you don't only need to do a test like we learned in later. There can be convincing evidence of something, but if you didn't do it as an experiment and you only did it as an observational study, then you can't say that one caused the other to change. If you want, and you can look at the end of your chapter 4 notes for this, but if you don't really care about causation, but you're trying to take your results and generalize it to a bigger population, then you need random sampling. So that's why we almost always have random sampling, because there's no point of, if you're not trying to use your data for a bigger population, there's really probably no point in what you're doing. Okay, so random sampling helps you generalize your findings to a bigger population. Random assignment allows you to imply causation. So that is chapter 4. I think I hit on everything. If you see anything else, let me know. But that is all I have for today. If you're working on your AP assignment, make sure you get as far as you can before Thursday so you can ask questions during our Zoom conference call if you need to.